Your life is being shaped right now by something you barely notice, not by your job, not by the economy, not by other people, by your thoughts. Most people live their entire lives without ever questioning them. They react, they worry, they spiral, they let impulses decide their mood, their relationships, and their future. And then they wonder why they feel exhausted, anxious, and out of control. Marcus Aurelius understood something most people still ignore today. Power does not begin in the world. It begins in the mind. According to Marcus Aurelius, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He ruled the most powerful empire on earth. He commanded armies, governed nations, and faced constant pressure, betrayal, disease, and war. But his greatest work was not political, it was internal. Marcus Aurelius treated the mind like a battlefield, like a muscle, like something that had to be trained daily, or it would turn against him. And this is where most modern people fail. We train our bodies, we train our careers, we optimize our finances, but we leave the mind completely untrained, exposed to fear, outrage, desire, and distraction. The Stoics saw this as dangerous. According to Epictetus, it is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. That insight alone explains why two people can face the same situation and experience completely different lives. One collapses, the other remains steady. This video is not about positive thinking. It is not about motivation. It is not about pretending everything is fine. It is about discipline of perception, mental command, inner authority. Over 2,000 years ago, Stoic philosophers developed practical tools to train the mind against chaos, loss, humiliation, and fear. These tools were used by emperors, soldiers, and leaders under pressure most people today could not tolerate. Modern psychology is now rediscovering what the Stoics already knew. According to William B. Irvine, the key to tranquility is not changing the world, but changing how we experience it. In this video, you will learn how Marcus Aurelius trained his mind to remain calm in a brutal world, not through theory, but through practice. Techniques that still work today, especially in a culture obsessed with comfort, validation, and constant stimulation. If you value self-command, mental clarity, and inner strength, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. You are watching the Stoic Lighthouse. Let the Stoic Lighthouse guide you toward peace and wisdom. This is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming unshakable. Now, we begin. Number 1. Control your response, not the world. Most people waste their lives fighting battles they can never win. They fight reality. They fight other people's behavior. They fight outcomes that were never theirs to command. They want life to be easier. They want respect without resistance. They want certainty in a world built on uncertainty. And when the world refuses to cooperate, they feel cheated, angry, unstable. Marcus Aurelius understood that this struggle is not only exhausting, it is pointless. He saw clearly that the desire to control external events is the fastest way to lose inner peace. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This principle cuts directly against modern culture. Today, we are taught that power means influence, visibility, control over narratives, control over others. The Stoics taught the opposite. Real power begins when you stop trying to bend the world and start governing yourself. Every day offers proof. A careless message threatens your status. A public opinion challenges your identity. A setback exposes how fragile your plans really were. The untrained mind reacts immediately. Defensiveness, resentment, anxiety. The trained mind does something different. It creates distance. Epictetus expressed this with brutal clarity. It is not events that disturb people, but their judgments about those events. What harms you is not what happens. It is the story you attach to it. This is why Stoicism is not emotional suppression. It is emotional literacy. Chrysippus argued that emotions are not uncontrollable forces. They are conclusions the mind reaches, often too quickly. If they are conclusions, they can be questioned. If they can be questioned, they can be refined. This insight is now echoed in modern cognitive behavioral therapy. The Stoics were not guessing. They were observing human psychology with precision. William B. Irvine explains this idea in modern terms. When we stop insisting that reality conform to our preferences, we experience a profound reduction in distress. Most suffering comes from expectation, from the belief that things should have gone differently. Marcus Aurelius trained himself to expect friction. Disappointment did not shock him. Resistance did not offend him. He treated obstacles as neutral facts, not personal attacks. This mindset changes everything. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you ask, "What response is worthy of me?" This single shift restores dignity. Try applying it. The next time irritation rises, do not rush to act. Do not repress it either. Pause long enough to examine it. Ask yourself one question: is this within my control? If it is not, release it without resentment. If it is, respond deliberately. Seneca warned about the danger of failing to do this. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Most distress is self-generated, not by events, but by interpretation. When you master your response, you reclaim authority over your inner world. Calm becomes stable, confidence becomes quiet, strength becomes invisible. This is not retreat from life, it is command over it. Without this discipline, no Stoic practice can stand. With it, the foundation of the inner empire is set. Number 2, the Stoic Journal, training the mind in private. Most people think of writing as expression. The Stoics saw it as correction. Marcus Aurelius did not write to inspire others. He wrote to discipline himself. What we now call meditations was never meant to be read. It was a private training ground, a place where an emperor confronted his weaknesses without witnesses. Marcus Aurelius warned himself, "Begin the day by telling yourself, I shall meet busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial people." This was not pessimism. It was preparation. The Stoic Journal was not a diary of feelings. It was a mental briefing. In modern terms, it functioned like an internal after-action report, a space to review decisions, examine failures, and reinforce principles before emotion distorted memory. Seneca practiced the same discipline. At the end of each day, he interrogated his own conduct. Seneca explained, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day and review what I have done and said." This habit served one purpose: self-command. By writing, the Stoic slows down thought. He separates impulse from judgment. He forces the mind to explain itself, and in doing so, exposes its errors. Chrysippus believed that progress in virtue required constant self-examination. Without reflection, the mind repeats the same mistakes while believing it is improving. Modern psychology confirms this insight. Donald Robertson explains that Stoic journaling creates distance between thought and reaction. It allows the practitioner to observe patterns, not just moments. Writing turns chaos into structure, noise into clarity. This is why journaling remains a tool used by elite performers today. Military leaders debrief, athletes review footage, executives track decisions. Not to dwell on mistakes, but to refine judgment. The Stoic Journal works the same way, not to punish yourself, not to indulge guilt, but to train awareness. William B. Irvine describes this practice as a rehearsal of character. Each entry reinforces what kind of person you're becoming, not just what happened to you. A simple structure is enough. At the end of the day, ask yourself, What did I do well today? Where did I act against my own values? What can I do better tomorrow? There is no audience, no performance, only honesty. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, taught that progress begins when we stop lying to ourselves. The journal removes excuses. It reveals patterns the ego prefers to hide. Over time, something subtle happens. You begin to notice your thoughts before they turn into actions. You catch errors earlier. You correct yourself faster. The mind becomes quieter, not because life is easier, but because awareness is sharper. Training the mind like Marcus Aurelius begins in silence, with a pen, far from applause. This is where discipline grows. Number 3. Rehearse loss to build unbreakable strength. Most people try to feel confident by avoiding uncomfortable thoughts. They distract themselves. They numb uncertainty. They assume that if they do not think about loss, it will somehow spare them. The Stoics took the opposite approach. They trained for loss the same way a soldier trains for battle, calmly, deliberately, without panic. Seneca understood this discipline deeply. Seneca advised, "He robs present ills of their power, who has perceived their coming beforehand." This practice was known as premeditatio malorum, the deliberate rehearsal of adversity. It was not meant to create fear, it was meant to remove surprise. Marcus Aurelius lived surrounded by instability. Plagues swept through Rome. Trusted allies betrayed him. Wars dragged on for years. Death was never theoretical. Instead of hoping for comfort, he prepared for disruption. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Begin each day by telling yourself that you will meet interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness." This was not pessimism, it was realism. The mind that expects ease collapses under pressure. The mind that expects resistance remains composed. In modern life, the threats look different, but the principle remains the same. Careers collapse overnight. Public reputation can vanish in hours. Relationships end without closure. Health fails without warning. The untrained mind panics when identity is threatened. The trained mind adapts. Chrysippus argued that fear intensifies when the mind treats loss as unthinkable. When adversity is rehearsed, its emotional charge weakens. The event may still hurt, but it no longer paralyzes. Modern psychology now describes this as stress inoculation. Exposure, even imagined, reduces shock. William B. Irvine explains that visualizing loss serves two purposes. It prepares the mind for adversity, and it sharpens gratitude for what still remains. When you imagine losing comfort, you stop taking it for granted. When you imagine losing status, you detach your worth from applause. When you imagine losing control, you strengthen adaptability. This practice does not harden the heart. It strengthens the spine. Try this exercise. Picture losing something you rely on, your position, your income, your physical ability. Do not dramatize it. Observe it. Then ask yourself one question. If this happens, what kind of person must I become to endure it? This question shifts the mind from fear to responsibility. Epictetus captured this perspective clearly. Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, wish that what happens happens the way it happens. Strength is not built by avoiding hardship. It is built by facing it mentally before it arrives. The Stoic who has rehearsed loss is difficult to intimidate, difficult to destabilize, difficult to manipulate, because nothing essential depends on illusion. This is how resilience is formed, not through optimism, through preparedness. Number 4, remember death. Learn how to live. Modern culture treats death like a forbidden subject. We avoid it. We distract ourselves from it. We act as if ignoring it will somehow make it disappear. The Stoics believed this avoidance was a mistake. They understood that forgetting death leads to a shallow life. Remembering it, on the other hand, brings clarity. Marcus Aurelius returned to this idea constantly, not because he was morbid, but because he was honest about time. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This thought was not meant to create fear. It was meant to eliminate waste. When you remember that life is fragile, trivial anxieties lose their grip. Ego softens. Urgency becomes precise. Seneca warned that the real tragedy is not death, but distraction. Seneca observed, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Most people postpone life. They delay courage. They save authenticity for later. The Stoic does the opposite. By keeping death in mind, the Stoic filters decisions. What matters stays. What is petty dissolves. Zeno taught that a good life is lived in accordance with nature, and nature does not negotiate with time. It moves forward without apology. When you accept this, your priorities change. You stop performing for approval. You stop arguing over status. You stop clinging to roles that no longer fit. Marcus Aurelius saw power, fame, and legacy for what they were, temporary arrangements. Marcus Aurelius reflected, "All that you see will soon change, and you yourself will soon be no one, nowhere." This realization does not weaken ambition. It purifies it. Ryan Holiday explains that awareness of death strips life down to essentials. When time is limited, clarity sharpens. You invest energy where it counts. Family, character, purpose. Epictetus framed life as a role assigned for a brief moment. Not chosen, but entrusted. Epictetus taught, "Remember that you are an actor in a play. The length of the play is not yours to decide, but how well you perform your role is." The Stoic does not rush life in panic. He does not cling to it in denial. He shows up fully. Remembering death teaches presence. It teaches gratitude without attachment. It teaches courage without illusion. When you understand that tomorrow is not guaranteed, you stop living on autopilot. You speak more honestly. You choose more carefully. You waste less energy on resentment. Memento mori is not a slogan. It is a lens. Through it, life becomes sharper, heavier, and more meaningful. This is not about fearing the end. It is about respecting the moment. And that respect changes how you live today. Training the mind, like Marcus Aurelius, is not a philosophical exercise. It is a way of standing upright in a world that constantly tries to pull you apart. You learned that strength does not come from controlling outcomes, but from mastering your response. That writing in private sharpens judgment when emotions try to blur it. That rehearsing loss builds resilience before life tests you. And that remembering death strips away what is false and forces you to live with intention. None of this is abstract. These practices were forged under pressure, tested through suffering, and refined across centuries. They are tools, and tools only work when they are used. The world will continue to be unpredictable. People will continue to disappoint. Life will remain uncertain, but your mind does not have to be. When you govern your thoughts, you reclaim authority over your actions. When you discipline perception, you stabilize emotion. When you act with clarity, chaos loses its grip. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these practices are you going to apply first? Comment below. Your answer matters more than you think. If this video gave you clarity, share it with someone who needs steadiness right now. Like the video and subscribe to the channel to support this work. You are watching the Stoic Lighthouse. Let the Stoic Lighthouse guide you toward peace and wisdom. In the next video, we will explore a topic that challenges modern assumptions about desire, discipline, and masculinity. We will question why restraint is often misunderstood, why self-control has lost its value, and how ancient wisdom exposes a truth most men are never taught to confront. To leave you with a final thought, one that captures the spirit of this entire journey. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. See you in the next video.